Nobody will notice it 1-to-1, I hope. And they won't notice that piece of tape magically vanishing in the background either. Somebody left tape up there. Okay.
Okay.
19 minutes.
Tell me about Lutheran. Why?
Well,
why
yeah.
did Lutheran
Well, I was a Lutheran before I got into Luther, but what I was really, and so I basically had his theological approach. But what I really was interested in Luther was that he was asked to write so much about the world, politics, economics, everything in the ethical area. And that's what I really got interested in Luther, because I already accepted his faith alone doctrine. That's where I'm at. My activity isn't the thing that saves me, but I want to get out into, what I love about Luther is that he was not only looking up at God, but he was looking at society, and that a Christian needed to get out and do something for people and help them and help society in general, whatever it is, education, politics, economics, and so forth. So I really got interested when I started reading Luther's Ethics, volume 41 to 44. What he said about, money and society and politics, what should rulers be like? How should we react to rulers when you don't like what they're doing? Should you rebel and take over the government, or should you do what the government says? And all these questions. And also, he had things to say about other things in society which really interested me, particularly in the area of Jews, for example.
Yeah.
And a variety of areas in the world. And he was asked to do that by people, and he was for 40 years, or 30, he was a monk. He was a theologian.
Yes.
How could he write about all of this
And
stuff?
so that's my question about Luther and society. Wasn't he one of the first great thinkers to talk about you are called wherever you are, not just the monks in the monastery? That
yeah.
your vocation can be totally
Vocation is a mother
secular.
changing a diaper on a baby.
Yeah.
Vocation, you are called, being called. I was called to Concordia. The Lutheran Church has a thing called you're being called. It's not just your decision, but somehow there's some kind of spiritual aspect to this, which is unexplainable and is not rational. But then on the other hand, a lot of Luther's theology is not rational. I mean, a Trinity. How do you believe in a Trinity? And there's a lot of other things. How do you believe in a sacrament of communion that Christ's body and blood is there? I mean,
So these are great large questions of life.
These are big questions, and rational minds are not going to answer them, basically. You either are called and have been, prompted to say, yes, I'm going to believe this impossible stuff, or not.
So it sounds like it was more than just the theology, just the intellectual aspect. It was Luther as a whole and the Reformation of calling and the great questions of life and meaning. And
the things that were going on in his age, with the church being the politic, with church and politics being one. That was Luther's big problem with at that time, the only church, the Roman Catholic Church, was that politically they were very involved in sometimes ruling the political. Luther said there are two areas in life. There's the spiritual life, and there's
the two kingdoms.
The two kingdoms idea was the really thing that got me going at first. And I agree with that so much, that the church is for saving souls, and politics is for making it a better place for people to live.
Okay, so.
And they're not the same thing.
Concordia, how did you get called to be here at Concordia?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I certainly wasn't. When I left Concordia, I said I'd never come back. And I got a bad grade from the president of the school
when
in
you
religion.
Graduated, okay.
And I was real sensitive to my grades, and he gave me a C on a paper, and I said, I'm gone. After I graduated, I'll never come back to Concordia in my life. And that's the interesting thing. By the time I graduated from college and was in getting my master's degree, there was a certain individual, they were such good teachers that I had at Concordia, by the name of Art Wallers. And Art Wallers mailed me a letter and asked me if I would like to teach at Concordia, full-time, baseball and historian. Even though at that time I was in the Army for 6 months in Oklahoma when I got the letter.
Now,
But I was also playing professional baseball.
had he been one of your teachers here? 'Cause he
Art
came in
Wallers
46.
was from freshman on.
Oh, okay.
Art Wallers has been
So he
here
knew
since
you.
1946.
He knew you and wrote you and asked you to be here.
He, some reason liked me. I don't know why. I was a good baseball player for him. But he wrote me a letter, and I was playing professional baseball for the Salem Senators. And they were going to trade me. I had this letter. I just got out of the military, had this letter, and I had just left the University of Oregon because I had to go into the military, so I only put in 2 terms at first. And then I get this letter, and I decide, Dwaine, are you going to be going to the major leagues? No, you're not good enough to be in. Are you going to play in the minor leagues for 10 years and earn nothing and just go in nowhere? Then what are you going to do? So I seem to think the good Lord and Art Wallers, his representative, pulled me off of that. I quit. I said, don't trade me to Lewiston, Idaho. I'm going to Portland to teach.
I think
So
that was
that's
a
how I
wonderful
got to
story.
Concordia.
And then how did you come to stay
Oh,
here
by the
for
way,
so long?
I was only there supposedly for 1 year because
Okay.
a certain John Scheck, who I was replacing for a year, was at the University of Oregon getting his doctorate.
Oh, okay.
And so I had a job, at least, for a while. But when he came back that next year, what was I going to do? Well, it so happened that I was getting my master's degree, so why don't we move? We don't have a person to teach history in the college, the new junior college. Not really new. So they moved me into the college to teach the next year.
And you were
See, I
teaching
came out to
history.
teach in the high school, although we were a junior college and high school together, so I was coaching the college baseball team. John Book was coaching in the high school. And so what happened is I coached in one and I taught in the other. The next year I went together into the junior college and then taught history in the morning and coached baseball in the afternoon.
So you got to do both of your great loves.
I got to do both of what I love to do. And over the years, I finished my master's, and then when they decided to go 4 years in 1980, President Weber said, Dwaine, if you want to come back and teach, you're going to have to get a doctorate, because we're going 4 a year. And I wouldn't ever think about getting a doctor's degree. I didn't think I was smart enough, and why should I do that? But it turned out to be the worst economic time for us. We were even poorer when we were in graduate school as I was when I was at Concordia. And both of them were, you could say you could be poverty stricken in both areas. And the University of Washington, 1969 to 74, were some of the greatest years that our family had, and we were the hardest pressed. But we were in Germany together, we were helping each other. We were in Seattle. My wife got a job as a nurse to help so we could afford for me to study for 5 years. And so that brought our family very much together, and our kids went to German. So when I found out I was going to go to Germany, I put them in a German school in Seattle, and they just loved it. On Saturdays, they'd always go to German to learn so they could at least hear it.
Your
So
kids.
when we moved over,
Yeah.
and it turned out another miracle. The teacher of our oldest son, Jonathan, who's now an architect in Seattle, was from Magdeburg. I couldn't believe that's where I was going to do my doctorate studies, my research in Magdeburg. And here, this lady's mother and father lived in Magdeburg. And so when I went to Magdeburg for the long time, I lived with them in their house. Every time I would go back and forth from West to East Germany. And the only reason I got away with it is their other son was a big cheese in the Communist Party. And so he allowed me to live with them.
You Westerner.
So the miracles involved in my life in some ways,
That is
whether
amazing.
it's my marriage, my education, my kids,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the greatest gifts I've ever had.
And you said that, okay, this was both a great time, one of the highlights of your life, and then you said that it was also one of the darkest times. Yeah, would you be willing to tell me about that?
Well, I don't know. You have to live and experience a totally communist, militaristic environment to understand it. I don't think most people, I don't know what to say. I'm
Was there
just saying
culture shock going on there
Huh?
too? Culture shock?
Culture, well, yeah, but I mean, I knew good enough German to get along there, and I met a lot of interesting, nice people, but none of them really could talk to you about the way they felt because they were so scared. There's a lot of fear in it. Now, since I had this friend who was a communist high party member, he took me around and showed me why he said in 50 years communism will be throwing over capitalism in the world.
Oh,
Because we
really?
were so good. He took me to a lot of factories and stuff that a Westerner is not supposed to see. That's what I'm saying. I got to do some things because of this communist friend, quote unquote. And the other thing is that I was sad about was the cathedral in Magdeburg, the gorgeous place, and not destroyed in the Second World War, but the church was in such bad, the Lutheran church, which was the dominant church in East Germany, had just gone into the, drink. I mean, if you stayed a pastor, you were not going to have anything. You just probably were starving to death. And most of the people that went there had to have the lowest jobs. You could not have a lawyer or a party member or whatever. If you wanted to be a party member, you couldn't be a member of the church. And so the church was really suffering.
So how did that impact you? How did that change your life or make a mark on you?
Well, I came to appreciate, living in America. Every culture has problems. But when you get to points where you can't do what you can't be a religious person, or you can't get a really decent job unless you're a Communist Party member, and you have to reject God. I think that kind of society,
So you saw that up close. Did
Yeah,
that have an impact on your
yes,
Christian life,
yes.
your
Well,
everyday?
I mean, I
faith?
feel I've been a Christian all of my life. It's unusual. I really didn't even have in my youth some times when I really thought, what am I doing in a church? I'm 20 years old, a boring situation. I don't know why. I didn't have the kind of typical approach. I was usually very close to I had good pastors and I think and friends that helped in that respect. But
So after your whole life and that experience and Concordia, what would you say about the word Lutheran? What images come to mind? What do you think when somebody says the word Lutheran?
well, of course, with my own study of Luther, I become so entranced with him in a way. I'm not saying he's God or there's no sinner, but I'm a Lutheran because of what he did. And of course, practically, that's when I got older and thought about it.
Mhm.
Before, when I was young, I was a Lutheran because my parents were Lutheran. And they sent me to school, to Lutheran school, and da, 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 da. And I just thought I wanted to go to a Lutheran high school too, and my parents wanted me to do that. And they lived a half a block from the school. When my sophomore, junior, senior year of high school, we lived a half a block from Concordia. So I basically stayed in the dorm rooms a lot at night with kids, because this was a high school where high school kids lived in dormitories.
Mhm.
And you don't have that anymore in society. It's gone. But my best friends, a lot of them came from those years. One of them was my wife's brother,
Ah,
Pastor Ted Creefall
okay.
from Tacoma,
Okay.
or Olympia now.
And that's how you met Rachel?
And I saw her picture on his
That is
desk.
a great story.
Who is that good looking? Sheesh. Yeah, that was it. And then another way, what continued that was, but that was, then there were some years in there. And how I got with Rachel was I came back to teach at Concordia, and she was going to nursing school at Emmanuel, and she had to come over with the class to Concordia to get chemistry classes because we had chem labs.
Okay.
And so she was a student here, and then I saw her again, and that's when I kind of got interested.
Okay, no, that's great. When you look back over all these decades, what are the major changes that you see that that you are proudest of, or ones that you see, is this a direction that we should still be going?
No.
Because you were here 50
I'm a
years
historian.
and all. Yeah,
I'm
so
a
you were the
historian.
history person. So
History
can you
changes.
prognosticate for us?
Huh? Well, there are things that I loved when it was small school. Okay? Because I loved the intimacy, and all of the profs lived on the campus. It was just the community that I loved. I'm not saying it was a better college academically, although these people that were here, these pastors, for most of them, I wasn't a pastor, but they were pretty sharp people. I remember my German teachers, Pastor Boss and Pastor Stunkel, and these guys are brilliant. You don't find more brilliant people than those people. And Weber himself, the president of Holy. And Lorenz, we had a Lorenz now whose son is a big-time lawyer in Portland. He was my math teacher, and I hated math. And boy, I had to study, to make it, and chemistry, and I got to do it because they pushed my fanny to do it.
Discipline.
But now, Concordia, it wouldn't be here because the Synod paid all the bills. So the president didn't have to recruit people and money to keep it going. The Synod paid 90% of the bill, and the tuition paid the other. Now we're in an age when the church can't afford to run schools like Concordia's. All of them have to make it on their own. So we've got how many thousands of students now here? 5,000? So that's good, isn't it? I think so. It gives us more money. But there are certain personal things that don't exist anymore. All the coaches here, and I'm not against at least I hope we say you have to be a Christian student to come here. You have to be some kind of Christian to teach here, not to come here. I think we could have Mormons and atheists, and I had Jews in class that were terrific students here while I was here.
So you are still looking
I
into
want
the
those
future
students
for
to come,
us.
but I want the faculty and the school to remain Lutheran.
That Christian
I'm a little
foundation.
concerned only about that. I think the president and the administrators should always be Lutheran people. And I would appreciate if more of our faculty was, not because they're not good faculty members, obviously, but
to keep that deep Christian sacramental foundation.
Just in the athletic department, somebody told me we have 10 people there, 9 or 10, not one is a Lutheran. Well, does that mean I'm prejudiced against these wonderful Christian people that come from all of these evangelical or Catholic or anything? I respect all of it. It's just, I would like Concordia to remain a Lutheran institution which reaches out to the community and brings in atheists or anybody to hear a Lutheran pastor in religion class, or a Lutheran pastor in chemistry class, or a coach. That's the only reason I say I would like us to remain Lutheran without being prejudiced against any other group. I hope we retain getting only Christian teachers because we've got enough public schools. We need to keep the Linfields and Lewis and Clarks need to stay Baptist and Methodist. And they're not anymore. And they're not anymore. And that's sad. Lewis and Clark, when I was playing against them in baseball in college, was Presbyterian. And Linfield was Baptist. And Pacific was Congregational or something.
So that loss of deep identity.
Well,
is
Lamont
something
was
you notice.
Methodist. I wish they would be like us and grow and have any students, but to retain their historical
Their deep roots.
religious aspect. That's all I'm saying.
you. We're gonna take a break and then we're gonna come back. Thank you.